The spirit of innovation is deeply ingrained in America, and Google is helping Americans innovate in ways both big and small. Central Texas Regional Mobility Authority is using Google AI to create smarter tolling systems and improve traffic flow for Texans. This is a new era of American innovation. Find out more at g.co/American innovation.
Why does the United States pay higher drug prices than other countries? Because America's the only country in the world where 340B hospitals mark up drug prices and PBM middlemen charge billions in hidden fees. Meanwhile, Americans subsidize the research and development for new cures. Other countries benefit, but don't pay their fair share. Crack down on the middlemen. End the free riding. Lower drug prices. Go to balancethescales.org to learn more. Paid for by Pharma.
Welcome in, everybody, to the Talk is Cheap podcast, your go-to destination for all things New York Giants. I'm your host, Ryan Novozinski, joined here, as always, by my co-host and NJ.com beat partner, Darryl Slater. So, today we have a very special episode for you because we have the Giants training camp preview. The rookies reported to camp on Tuesday, the veterans report next Tuesday, and we reporters meet there next Wednesday. Giants training camp is here, and today we've got you covered with our preview. Full disclosure, there was a little bit of technical difficulties early on in the podcast, so we're going to kick it right to Darryl, who's talking about, he's mid-rant about Darryl Waller, who was obviously came out of retirement, was traded from the Giants to the Miami Dolphins in exchange for a 6th-round pick a couple weeks ago. We're just kind of getting some of the housekeeping stuff out of the way, some of the Giants notes that happened in the past couple weeks, like that, and another one to come after, before we get right into our training camp preview. Enjoy.
And on top of all the physical concerns, I mean, you have to wonder where his head is at. I mean, he went on a podcast this offseason and talked about the moment that he decided he didn't want to do this anymore. He didn't want to play football. And that's certainly understandable. Basically saying he was out there blocking, which is part of his job as a tight end. It was basically like, I don't feel like doing this anymore, which, okay, fine. That's like kind of annoying. I can understand to have to do that. And it's like physically taxing. But that's going to be part of his NFL life, right? No matter what. It's not like he's going to become a quarterback all of a sudden. It was kind of bizarre to see that he decided all of a sudden in the same offseason where he said that about, like, I was mentally checked out, that he decided to keep doing this, I think.
No, it sure was. It sure was. And you know, I feel like this is just one of those situations where, you know, if he's going to come out of retirement and the Giants can get a free draft pick out of it, why not? Obviously, that doesn't make up for the initial trade and what they gave up for it, but you know, and obviously the downfall of Waller thereafter. But they'll take the pick for a retired player, essentially. Next bit of news that we missed before we get into the good training camp stuff that we know you guys are all here for, is, and you can even just give me a sentence on this, Darryl. Odell Beckham Jr. returning to the Giants. Yes or no? Are you in or are you out?
No chance. There's no way they should do this. I mean, forget about whether he would be a good or bad locker room presence. And, you know, I think those of us on the outside perhaps have a different perspective, certainly have a different perspective, perhaps have a different opinion than his teammates on whether he would be a positive or negative influence in the locker room. But you're not bringing guys to be mascots or coaches in the field. Like, can the guy still play? Is he physically able to play? Does he have it still? Can he produce? The answers to enough of those are no, that the answer to the bigger question is no. They should not bring him in. It doesn't make sense. I mean, do you need receiver depth? Yeah, like, I think you can find it in a way that you go get a younger player who you can develop, you know, who could grow into something. You know what Odell Beckham is at this point in his career, and it doesn't make sense.
No, it does not. I pictured, you know, wider, like Darius Slayton having like a couple drops, and then, you know, the fans are going to be chanting for Odell OBJ. And obviously, I don't think he'll take a number 5 wide receiver role. He has nothing at this point. You know, the 1-day contract, if you want to do that, fine. But to sign him for the veteran minimum would just, I think it'd be such a distraction. But now let's go right into training camp. Again, the star of the show here today on today's episode, and certainly the thing that's going to dominate our lives for the next month. Darryl, I feel like, you know, with the Giants this year, there's obviously a lot of intrigue because of the quarterback situation, right? this is your first training camp in 6 years without Daniel Jones. First of all, obviously, it has to be a little odd for you. But second of all, there's again the big intrigue there is Russell Wilson, but the main attention getter is Jackson Dart. What do you think? What are your expectations for both of them this training camp? A veteran in Wilson who has a little bit to prove, and Jackson Dart who has a whole heck of a lot to prove if he wants to be the savior of this team's quarterback situation.
I mean, I was thinking about this before we started recording. The Giants, the number of years that they've had where they've had a high profile a first round draft pick come in and be like, this could be the guy, right? So Eli Manning, when they drafted him, and then really not until Daniel Jones in 2019, and he wound up starting as a rookie. And then this. So this is a really uncommon situation for the Giants to be in. Hot shot, rookie quarterback, potential future of the franchise coming in, and his first training camp, and what has he got, and can he win the job immediately, or how does he look? Like, this makes for a really different, unique wouldn't be the right word because that would, convey singularity, but a different sort of camp than the Giants have typically had over the last 2 decades. I mean, they've only had this situation. This is the third time. So all eyes will be on Jackson Dart, and no one is fooling themselves and thinking Russell Wilson still has a lot of time left in the NFL. I'm sure Jackson Dart will do everything he possibly can to push for the job. Ultimately, I think Russell Wilson will start in week 1, because these coaches they tend to be very conservative in how they do things, right? So I think it's possible that there could be a super short leash on Russell Wilson. And I would be shocked if he starts the entire year. Maybe shocked even if he starts into November. But the important thing for Jackson Dart is put some good stuff on film, whether that means he's the week 1 guy or not, because I think I talked about this in the spring. That's the lasting impression. Of course, what you do during practice during the year, which we don't see, will, dictate how quickly the coaches will potentially put him out there during the season if Russell Wilson gets hurt, or rather not gets hurt, but is performing poorly while healthy. Obviously, if he gets hurt, he's getting replaced. But yeah, I think that this is an audition for Jackson Dart, whether he's the week 1 guy or not. It's not a defeat if he doesn't get the week 1 starting job. I mean, far from it, because his time is coming at some point, probably sooner rather than later. But it will be really interesting to see this summer how he handles things like increased pressure in practice. Obviously, the quarterback doesn't get hit, but it's more their practices in pads. They're more game-like situations. Obviously, the preseason games are games, against opponents. They're hitting. Obviously, I don't need to tell people that, but those will be truer tests for him than what happened in the spring, and he acquitted himself just fine in the spring, and that's fine. It beats the alternative, but I would say plenty of hurdles remain for him.
I've been saying it for weeks now, but the Giants coaching staff, this Giants regime, period, the one thing that they have to sell this year is hope, right? Because they're not going to get any hope through wins against this schedule, barring some sort of dramatic fall off from the Chiefs, Chargers, and all the other gauntlets that are on this, the gauntlet period that is on this schedule. So that hope has to come through Jackson Dart, and even then, I don't know if it'll save their jobs. So I'm fascinated to see, like you said, how short or long this leash is for Russell Wilson. I'm leaning towards, it potentially being short as the weeks go on. And that's not to say if he has a bad first game against the Commanders, who obviously went to the championship game last season, that they're going to bench him. But I wonder, if this team's at 0-4, what exactly Brian Daboll is going to end up doing. But for Wilson, to touch on him a little bit, because I feel like you have to talk about him, right? I think with him, it's a good. He fits in pretty well with the receivers that they have. Not only just Jalen Hyatt, who obviously is one of the guys that we're going to potentially touch on later. A guy that was drafted pretty much, to be their kind of deep threat. He has those deep balls, but with Wilson, it's going to be a little bit of all or nothing, right? His style is obviously the moon balls and the deep shots, which can help out with with Hyatt and obviously Malik Neighbors is the number 1 threat there that can have success with that. But I have concerns with how he does under pressure, right? His accuracy is not great. If you look at the PFF numbers on under pressure, his accuracy, like a lot of quarterbacks, isn't great, but he's doesn't have the athleticism necessarily to maneuver around like he once did. Um, you know, but overall, I mean, even with Wilson, take away Jackson Dart, I think this is one of the more interesting quarterback situations that the Giants have had, as you mentioned, in decades. So we'll be certainly keeping an eye on that every day. Um, Another thing to look out for is potential fights that will happen. We saw it already in minicamp, but the main fight is the one that actually matters, and it belongs in the trenches. Darryl, does the offensive line stand a chance against this overwhelming pass rush? And will it almost serve as a as good training for them because they have to, pass block and run block against such a stout unit?
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is they're going to face the Giants will defensive lines that are very strong, like their own defensive line, right? So this will be a great test for this offensive line. I don't know, patchwork is a word, sort of overhauled to some degree, not really, but rebuilt. Um, they have some challengers in there in terms of guys who could wind up taking jobs. The Evan Neal situation is interesting, and so um, everyone knows, like for years and years, the offensive line has been a huge storyline for the Giants, and more often than not because it's been terrible, or at least bad, and so that's another consideration to take into consideration, I guess, when you talk about whether you're going to start Jackson Dart early, because there is such a thing as putting him out there too early. It's easy to say, oh, start the guy early, or start him week one, but if he doesn't have the awareness to spot like an oncoming pass rush or something like that, and you're pairing him with an offensive line that is developing, lackluster, whatever you would say, you're asking for major trouble there in terms of a potential serious injury to a player. So, or to not just any player, but your prized rookie quarterback. So that's something to take into account, like when they look at what they're going to do at the quarterback position early on. Um, but yeah, I mean, like I don't see any world in which this O line dominates the Giants D line in these training camp practices. I would be very surprised if that happened.
Yeah, no, there's no chance. And on the injury front too, you're going to be monitoring how Andrew Thomas looks. You're going to be monitoring how John Runyon looks. Obviously, post surgery for both of them. There's going to be some moving pieces here, and the guys on the fringe too. The Giants signed a couple swing tackles. They still have the big Evan Neal question that I'm eager to see finally put to rest when everybody realizes, hey, he's been on the roster for the past several years. If he was a good guard, they would have moved him to guard years ago, and not
Yes,
continued to run him out as a tackle. I'm sure you're on the same boat
correct.
as someone that's not expecting Evan Neal to have this big career turnaround. Correct?
Yes, that's exactly right.
Yes. Okay. Um, Darryl, who do you think has the most to prove in this camp? I think there's a number of names that are on the bubble. Obviously, we'll have more on that once we do our written preview. But who's the guy that you're looking at that has the most to prove?
Well, I mean, obviously, Russell Wilson's going to be essentially fighting for his job or fighting to see what kind of leash he's going to be on entering the season. There is that. Aside from the obvious in him, I think a fascinating one, you brought him up earlier quickly, was Jalen Hyatt, in that, this team needs complementary supplemental receivers to Malik Neighbors. And so is that Darius Slayton, or can Jalen Hyatt fill that role where he really didn't last year? It was a rocky season for him. He's a guy who came in really skinny, one-dimensional player in terms of a deep threat. He put on a bunch of weight this offseason coming off his, it was his second year last year. It's not like it was his rookie year. He really has not done anything in the NFL, quite frankly. And he's bigger now, and he's got a chip on his shoulder. That's all well and good, but can he run routes other than a deep straight line route? So obviously he's stronger. He, as you expect, he insisted that he's still fast. Okay, great. Like, and he can fight through the physicality that NFL cornerbacks are going to throw at him. But I think you need to see some versatility in his ability to do more than just run a straight line. Look, I mean, and if he's fast enough at his size and he can fight through guys and still run fast and just run deep routes and can do that effectively, okay, more power to him. But um, there's not a lot of one-dimensional, really good wide receivers in the NFL. I mean that. So I think that you're going to have to see some versatility there, some growth in his game beyond just like putting on a bunch of weight.
Totally agreed. I said it a couple weeks ago myself. He can go in the weight room. He can gain 20 pounds. He can, even keep that quickness with him. But if he does not round out that route tree, it's going to all be for nothing, right? Like you can do whatever you can have the greatest offseason ever. But it doesn't matter if you don't become a more well-rounded wide receiver. And that's been the biggest knock on Hyatt. He's too
I'm sure he's
one-dimensional.
working on that, but yeah, I
Yeah.
think we agree there. It's not a Mr. Olympia competition, it's not a
Right.
it's not a track meet competition. It's football.
Yeah, and if again, if that doesn't translate onto the field, it's all going to be for nothing. You know, the one that the two guys that I'm looking at that with the most to prove. One we've already mentioned him, but it's Andrew Thomas. I need Andrew Thomas. We know that he's good. We know, but he needs to stay healthy, man, because he is the linchpin for this entire offensive line. If he goes down, the entire offensive line goes down. They paid him the big contract, but you need to prove that you're worth it by staying healthy this year. Easier said than done. You can't just really teach staying healthy, but at some point you're going to have to, start an entire season here. I think he started something like 13 games in the past 2 seasons. That's just unacceptable. You got to stay healthy. You got to stay on the field. And you got to the offensive line as a whole cannot just crumble once he goes down. But I'm starting to fear that that's pretty much the case for this Giants offensive line, as we saw last year, as we saw the past 2 years. The other guy I'm looking at is right on the other side of him is Kayvon Thibodeau. He had a decent season last year, underrated season, I think, to the point where he's even becoming an underrated player, based off the expectations from the going into this his rookie year. Had a decent rookie year, then has the pretty disappointing sophomore year, and then last year kind of comes in with lowered expectations, so nobody really again expects much from him, and he has an okay season next to Brian Burns. But we need to see the Kayvon Thibodeau that the Giants spent this number 5 pick on. So I am I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do. Can he compete with Abdul Carter, obviously the rookie coming in? And can he do something with that? But
Yeah, I think
anyways,
Carter. Yeah, I think the Carter situation is fascinating. Will he be the guy, right, opposite Brian Burns? I think that's entirely possible that he will. So ton of pressure on him, ton of pressure on Thibodeau. You mentioned Andrew Thomas, 6 starts last year, 10 the year before. We know what he can do when healthy, but the when healthy part's huge. Deontay Banks, another one I'd throw in there, right? Is he going to lose his job in camp to Cordell Flott? I mean, I think what has he done to prove that he should definitely be the guy opposite Paulson Adebo? So there's a lot of pressure on him. I mean, I think we have a whole blurb in our preview on guys who are under pressure, and I'm basically writing it by speaking it right now. I mean, we could know that these guys off the top of your head if you're a Giants fan, but um, it's worth reemphasizing that these are prominent players. And Thibodeau, Banks, first round picks there by this regime, and then of course Andrew Thomas, a guy who this regime paid. And a contract that does not look great so far through no fault of his own. It's just bad injury luck, but that's part of what makes contracts look great or not great. So 3 guys right there.
Deontay Banks cannot lose this job to Cordell Flott. I mean, that
I
would
think he
just
can. I think
no, he can, but he cannot. Oh
yeah.
my goodness, that would be such a terrible look for what already looks like a terrible draft pick for Joe Shane, one of many. Um, So we got training camp coming up next week. It's less than a week from today, actually. Um, we're excited to get all the coverage out to you guys, and we'll be there every day, mostly. For the most part, NJ.com will have someone there covering boots on the ground, and we will be sure to give you the latest on all of these question marks that we talked about: Russell Wilson, Jackson Dart, Deontay Banks versus Cordell Flott, which is a storyline that is developing in the past couple of weeks. But be sure to check all of our work out at NJ.com/Giants and continue listening to Talk is Cheap everywhere and anywhere you get your podcasts. For Ryan Novozinski and Darryl Slater, have a great day.